Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video I'd like to talk to you about Apple's car initiative, by some called the iCar, by others called Apple Car. This car project of Apple already got a lot of attention years ago, and it's interesting that suddenly now it's again gaining a lot of new attention. So why is all of this important? Well, because of course Apple is one of the most loved, one of the most innovative, and one of the most successful companies around. And because of this, it's rumored that Apple's car initiative may completely disrupt the car industry. And of course, the questions that I then would like to pose is that really going to happen? And if so, how is Apple going to do that? So without any further ado, let's jump into the topic. So we all know Apple as a company, especially from its phones, from its tablets, from the iPod, from laptops, from computers, right? So we know Apple predominantly from hardware. But in recent years, Apple has shifted its strategy quite substantially. Apple's current hardware sales kind of are stalling due to, on the one side, political tensions between the US and China, for example, with the trade war that we have had over the past years, but also because of saturation of markets in terms of, for example, smartphone sales, but also other types of hardware sales. Simply put, many of Apple's products have been sold so much over the past years that we're kind of saturated. Nothing really new is coming out. So we're also not that much longing anymore for the next Apple smartphone, next Apple tablet, and so on. And then you see that Apple's hardware sales are not growing anymore that fast. And this is of course a big problem if your business model depends on hardware sales, right? Which is the case for Apple. So amid this issue, rather than trying to sell more and more hardware, Apple has been looking at ways in which it can actually leverage the products it has already out there, the products that its consumers already have, and then trying to do this especially through software. So it's basically trying to get much more out of each Apple device beyond just selling the device. If you just sell a device, then you only get money from it once, right? You sell it, you get money. But if you can also get money from the software that's on the smartphone, then you're going to keep on getting money even after your initial sale of this hardware. And so this is actually what Apple is trying through its new software-based strategy, right? So in previous videos, we talked about this change in strategy. We talked also about the Apple One, which is basically a bundling of Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, iCloud, News Plus, and of course also Apple's Fitness Plus app. Apple is trying to bring all of these together, offer it to you for a certain subscription fee, and of course is trying to get through this more and more income from the hardware that it already sold to you before. So amid this strategy change, of course, it's the perfect moment for Apple to start focusing more and more on software as its hardware sales are stalling. So that's kind of clear, I think. But, there's also a second problem, and that's actually where the Apple Car comes in. So if you want to be successful through software, you're of course very dependent on hardware, right? If there's no hardware, then software basically has no point because software works on hardware. So if your hardware sales are stalling, surely to some extent your software is going to lead to you having additional income for at least a certain moment of time. But at some point, you're again either going to need new hardware for yourself or you're going to be dependent on other companies' hardware. And this is exactly the place where Apple actually needs the Apple Car. If you have new hardware, and on this new hardware, you can put new software, in this case, Apple's Apple One bundle, everything that's on it, if it can put it on new hardware that's going to bring out, then of course this is going to even further accelerate Apple's software strategy. And that's the very moment, of course, of the Apple Car. So the Apple Car allows Apple to have yet another sector for hardware sales. It will also be able to as a company, lift on the electric vehicle trend, right? Because for now, at least, Apple has not really had a big role in this other than its CarPlay operating system, which is basically like iOS that you have on smartphones. Apple was basically offering its adapted version for cars, but that was basically it. That was its role in the electric vehicle trend. But now with Apple Car, of course, it can have a major role in all of this. And if you think about how tiny yet the electric vehicle market is and how fast it's expected to grow, then of course this can lead to a lot of additional income, both on the hardware but also on the software side of things for Apple. On top of this, Apple will also be able to lift on the race for autonomous vehicles. Apple has already for years been trying to develop software and technology in the area of autonomous vehicles, and this is yet again a moment where it is not going to limit itself just to the technology and the software, but is actually also able to fuel this into its own Apple Car, iCar project. So this way, actually, Apple will be able to enter two sectors that are minimally contested, that are very limited in terms of rivalry, and Apple is able to flourish there, of course, contingent that it does things well, which we're going to talk about in a second. And so by providing a software, its own software, Apple software, to the Apple cars that is basically planning to build or have built, it can spur further its software income, and so it will have a new area of hardware on which it is again going to further leverage with its software, and so its hardware strategy with its new fueled, rebranded software strategy are going to go hand in hand in this new two minimally contested sectors, being on the one side electric vehicles and on the other side autonomous vehicles. So how should Apple take this massive assignment on, right? So that's a big question, because that's not easy. If this was easy, a new electric vehicle by a predominantly smartphone maker, then any smartphone maker would have done this already. And of course, Apple has other products as well. But if you look at the type of products it has, it's very, very different from a car. So it's a very massive assignment, and so then the question, of course, how should Apple approach this? So it does not really make sense for Apple to produce its own cars, right? You would need a lot of investment, and it will also take a lot of time. So let's unpack this a bit. So the shift from an iPod to a smartphone to an iPod to an iPad, is relatively gradual, right? You can see kind of how the change is moving. It's kind of predictable. Changes are of course sizable, but by no means as radical as moving from these types of products to a car. So producing the Apple car in that sense would require so much change that this, of course, out of the league of Apple's resource and capabilities that it currently basically has on its hands. Producing cars requires a massive upfront investment. It requires massive sales also to be able to spread you huge costs across a lot of products, right? Which is again very different from the current products and services that it is currently in. So it's not Apple's core domain, and so this also implies that Apple as a company will have to learn so much and will have to shift its focus so tremendously that this is going to cost Apple a lot of time and effort. So Apple could try to do all of this, but of course the other question that Apple could pose itself, and looking at the current news that's coming out in all sorts of media, I guess Apple has asked itself the following question: should Apple not engage in a collaboration, and should it not leave the production manufacturing part of things to a partner? So this actually makes a lot much more sense, because if you think about it, current existing producers, they might have so much more experience, they might have the capacity for it. So if Apple simply restricts itself to a certain amount of things, if it restricts itself to limits itself to technology, to design, to its operating system, if it does what it is best at, and then just make sure that there's this other partner that's going to engage in manufacturing and production, then what's there to lose? Apple can do what it's best at. And just like now, basically also it's kind of getting a lot of components from other parties, this time it can decide to leave its production and manufacturing to other parties, those that are actually better in doing that than Apple, where Apple was actually the better party in terms of doing the design, but not only design, but also the assembly of parts of its, let's say, smartphones and tablets and whatever. Now it's not the party that's actually better at the assembly and in the manufacturing and the production. Well, if you're not, then you should leave this to somebody else. So interesting in all of this, in the car project and in terms of the technology, is that Apple has, as I said, already for years invested in car technology. It has CarPlay already as an operating system. On top of that, it has a lot of patents already in terms of car design, in terms of car technology. So it has already preparing itself many years from engaging in the automotive industry, engaging in car design, and in the end, in delivering a car to the market. The question is not whether they are ready for it in terms of technology and operating system and design, but more so about the manufacturing and operation side of things. So let's assume that Apple is going to collaborate with a partner in order to make the manufacturing side and the operation side of things work, assuming that they don't have the capabilities for it, and that even though they have a lot of resources, they may not exactly know how to spend this in the most efficient and effective way. Of course, we also need to keep in mind that Apple may not want to wait too long with getting this car to the market, and so the longer it takes to do things itself, of course, the later this product is going to go to the market. So let's assume that Apple is going to collaborate with other parties. So perhaps first company that may come to mind if you're talking about electric vehicles is Tesla, but Tesla seems quite impossible after Elon Musk explained that he back in the days wanted Apple to buy Tesla in a situation in which Tesla actually needed the money to get its production upscaled and to actually survive in a very difficult industry. But apparently Elon Musk did not even get an invitation from Apple and from Tim Cook in specific. Well, this means that Elon Musk has not really forgotten about things as he tweeted about this and as he made this worldwide news. And so this also means that most likely collaboration is not something that's very likely. Also, Tesla does not have that much of a production capacity that it can handle wishes of Apple. So again, it might not make that much of a sense that Apple would collaborate with Tesla, given the fact that Tesla is booming, is quite successful in this area, and that because of that, on top of the fact that it does not have a lot of capacity, may not really want to also succumb to Apple's wishes, given also this unlucky occasion in the past. So if this is the case, we'd have to look at more traditional players in the automotive industry with, of course, a bigger capacity that are very much interested in electric vehicles, of course, but are not yet really where they aspire to be, or simply seek additional ways to become more relevant in this ever-growing and also ever faster growing market, particularly so the electric side of things. So in the past days, especially Hyundai got a lot of attention, got a lot of traction in media as a possible partner. And it makes kind of sense because Hyundai is reliable, it's experienced, and it's also well priced. And if you take this all together, it's actually all of the things that Apple would perhaps need to tear apart the automotive industry and get a very good position there. Also, Hyundai is very well known for its partnerships. It has a partnership with the Croatian Rimac company that's quite a legitimate player in the electric vehicle industry. Hyundai also works with Grab. It also works with Ola in terms of mobility. So that basically means that Hyundai is not a company that just wants to win itself. It wants to win together with its partners. And this is, of course, a warm welcome also to other partnerships, such as, for example, partnership with Apple. Hyundai's big benefit also that it is an Asian player, so it is active, predominantly known in a market where growth is going to be in the coming years, right? Especially in much bigger numbers than is going to be in, let's say, the West. And that's, I think, also a big plus for Hyundai. And also, a lot of Apple suppliers are there in Asia, close to, for example, also where Hyundai's manufacturing plant is. And this would, of course, be also a big plus to Apple's supply chain. So Honda is also an option. It's also Asian, so the same pros apply that apply to, for example, Hyundai. It's also much more of an open player than, for example, the other Japanese company we all know, which is Toyota. And there's, of course, also a big plus towards Hyundai, especially in competing with Toyota. And big benefit of Honda is also that's quite active both in the US and in Japan, meaning that's already quite well known in two big markets where most likely Apple, with its Apple Car or iCar, is going to be willing to be active. Volkswagen is an interesting option as well. It has this modular electric toolkit platform, which basically boils down to a platform with which Volkswagen tries to help others to design and to introduce electric vehicles, which is basically a signal again to others like, I'm willing to cooperate, I'm willing to help you out, let's partner up and let's get this electric vehicle market going, because then we'll all be winning. And so this is very important to think about Volkswagen as a potential partner. Volkswagen also struck, for example, a deal with Ford for electric vehicles, and Ford on its turn, of course, also owns a stake in Rivian, which is also an electric vehicle company. So then you see this Volkswagen-Ford alliance, and then Ford with Rivian in terms of this equity deal makes also perhaps things very interesting for Apple. It could be part of perhaps a winning alliance. So one of the biggest issues in the question of with whom are you going to collaborate is, of course, the issue of cannibalization. So will these partners that have their own cars and that have their own aspirations in the electric vehicle market, will they really commit to Apple, risking that they're going to cannibalize their own vehicles? So do they really think that this is going to be a win-win, or do they think that Apple is going to win much more from such a partnership, and because of that are they going to shy away from this full commitment to an Apple car or to an iCar? And so in this regard, perhaps the Canadian company Magna is a possibility, because this company does not have its own cars, so it will not be cannibalizing its own cars, but at the same time it's also a very well-skilled, well-experienced company in terms of car production. It's already producing cars for Mercedes, for BMW, for Jaguar, and so Magna might be a very interesting option in this regard. So due to political reasons, I do not really see a big chance for the Chinese company Geely, which basically is the company behind Volvo currently, because the US-China kind of Cold War, the trade war in between, the political tensions over the past years, which may of course get to a lower level with the Biden administration, but still it is something to keep in mind. And then you have Tata Motors, of course, with Jaguar Land Rover. Interesting party. It has less, of course, of the political tensions, but the thing with a Jaguar Land Rover is that there are a limited range of vehicles and there's a relatively limited progress in the EV area, and the location of its manufacturing plants is also not that nice compared to, for example, the Japanese and the Chinese locations. China's benefit is that this mainland, Japanese benefit is still that is close to the Apple supply chain, but Jaguar Land Rover is predominantly in India and in the UK, and this, of course, an important question mark. Would Apple, if everything is equal, prefer Jaguar Land Rover, given the fact that the supply chain might become more dispersed than it might ideally want it to be? So, of course, if we look forward about where's this all going to go to, the company to beat is, of course, without any doubt, Tesla, because Tesla's first mover advantage, because the fact that Tesla's sales are already quite decent, and of course also because Tesla already has this profitable business model that only gets more profitable as it is selling more through producing more. And of course also through an ever-increasing brand reputation that helps itself get even more traction in this electric vehicle market that still does not have that many successful players that have also a big sales amount. So Apple's advantage in competing with Tesla is, of course, its ecosystem, right? The Apple ecosystem, where it has already a lot of hardware, where it has already a lot of software. If it could help this click into its Apple car, into the iCar, then of course Apple can offer this seamless integration of technology and hardware that Tesla cannot, because Tesla of course has to restrict itself to the car only. Also, if Apple can do some things in terms of superior design together with this ecosystem, and if on top of that it could be economical in terms of price, for example through a Hyundai partnership, then odds could perhaps tip in the favor of Apple. So Apple could perhaps also make the difference in terms of this great battery technology that it might bring out. So think about it. Apple has already a lot of experience, know-how in terms of optimizing and improving battery technology, because of course it needs a lot of batteries for all of its hardware. So if it one way or another can translate all of this into improving current batteries for electric vehicles, then this would have been tremendous, because one of the biggest problems with electric vehicles is of course the battery, and with that the range of these electric vehicles. If Apple really can kick off range to this range that is at the current point at least unseen, then this might again become a massive competitive advantage to Apple. So if all of the things that I just mentioned are not going to be it, then Apple simply has to hope that a seamless iOS, or whatever name it's going to give to its operating system, a seamless integration of its operating system with the car that's going to be brought out, is going to be sufficient in tipping people over to the Apple car or the iCar. Of course, for this it would still need to have a competitive price and a competitive quality. So the question here, of course, that might come to mind is what's going to happen to the Android users, which are sizable. Well, this is a big question mark. Currently, of course, Apple also already has focused itself to people who wish to have an iOS device, right? Or a macOS device or whatever. At least Apple's own operating system is a must. And with that, you need to use Apple's own devices and hardware. If it is going to pursue a similar strategy with its car, and if you can only have the seamless integration of car and software, if you have Apple devices like an Apple phone, Apple tablet, Apple laptop, then it might mean that Apple is only going to focus itself to its current consumers or prospective Apple device consumers. And on the one side, this might be a big plus. It can help the seamless connection that it always has had and that's always has prided itself to last and to linger on. But the downside of things, of course, that your market share is going to be much more slim, and especially in the electric vehicle market, but the broader automotive market as well, scope is very important, your sizability is very important, and you need to be big in terms of your sales. And so I'm not sure whether Apple has a luxury here in this market to say, I don't want that many sales, I'm going to focus on profitability that comes from focus. This is only possible as Apple is going to focus itself to the luxury market, and it's going to try to be a Ferrari, a Porsche, a Rolls-Royce, an Aston Martin, and whatever. If it is going to focus on this higher segment, then sure. But if you look currently at its device, at its products, it's still in terms of the price range trying to appeal to the common person as well. It's not always like tremendously expensive. It's always in the higher end of the mid-range, let's say, but never to the extent that it's really luxurious that only the selected few can buy it. And so I don't really think that Apple's going to go to that segment. And if it is not going to go there, then just limiting yourself to the iOS or the macOS consumer might become a big problem, and Apple may have to provide integration not only to people who are into Apple products, but perhaps also to Android users. And now hopefully, of course, without it going to go at the cost of the seamless connectivity that you normally have in the Apple ecosystem. So another ray of light is that Apple has been known to work on a self-driving car, and with that, of course, has had a lot of investment already in artificial intelligence. We already talked a bit about this, but its potential of disrupting the automotive industry can also simply be if it has massive progress in terms of artificial intelligence coupled to its self-driving vehicle. Of course, the question here is mainly limited to big data. So how much experience does Apple have? How much data has it accumulated? And how much has it been able to optimize its technology for the Apple Car or the iCar? And which brings, of course, the question of, is Apple not too late for the self-driving car? Has it been able to really accumulate enough data, or are companies like Tesla in a better position because they have been already had the opportunity to have their cars drive around, and with this accumulate data from real life consumers on a wider scale? And so is Apple not too late and is not too inexperienced to become an important player in terms of self-driving cars, and with that, of course, AI coupled to big data? So with this, there comes this broader issue of is Apple not too late to the market? Not just in terms of the self-driving car, not just in terms of AI, but given that Tesla is already fully operational and has developed already quite some brand reputation, and has already been able to lay out this relatively vast, massive support network, and of course also Tesla infrastructure. And if you also think about other car manufacturers increasingly more coming up with their own electric vehicles, Volkswagen in this regard is coming really with some promising projects and really trying to do something great alongside Tesla, then the question is Apple not really too late? So Apple is thinking about anything in between 2024 and 2028, which means in about 3 to 7 years from now, right? And 2025 seems likely, but the 2028 time horizon would not surprise anybody, considering the fact that they have not started yet with any manufacturing or production at all, and they still have to test, and they still have to perhaps redesign and retest again and so on, and this is taking a lot of time. And so the later Apple is going to be, of course, the later it's going to be in terms of the timeliness of its design, of its technology, and of its infrastructure. And of course, the more prominent Tesla is going to be, and other players like, for example, NIO, the Chinese version of Tesla, is basically going to be. And if these companies become more successful, more known, if they become bigger, are able to accumulate more data, improve their self-driving technology through their artificial intelligence, learning, then the question is, of course, again, is Apple not too late with its Apple Car, with the iCar? So the final thing that I would like to point out is, the general public perception on electric vehicles, of course, also very important about whether Apple should move into this industry or not, and of course in terms of also how successful things are going to be, because in the car industry, you need to do a lot of upfront investments, and after that you need to sell a lot. And only if you sell a lot, you're able to spread your costs a lot. So if you're not able to sell a lot because people's perception of the electric vehicle market is not as positive as you hoped for, and so if this market is not going to develop as fast as you hoped for, but then you have a big problem. So what you basically should aim for is that you're entering this market the moment that electric vehicle sales are really skyrocketing, not just Tesla's, but the industry as a whole, because then if you position yourself well, just like Apple did with the iPhone back in the days in 2006, 7, 8, and then you're in a market where people are ready for it. And then when you're bringing your product out, there can be mass adoption of it, and you're able to spread your costs. Again, this, of course, on the condition that Apple, like it's always doing, is kind of aiming for the mid to high segment of the industry and not for the lonely, luxurious producer market. So if it is really going for the luxurious segment, then it doesn't have to be. It can go after the first adopters, the early adopters. It can go for people who are into luxurious stuff. It can go for people who want to be really, really different in terms of consumer. And then you don't really need to sell a lot. But again, if I know Apple a little bit, it will still be interested in selling a decent amount of its products. Not too much, like for example Samsung or Huawei or Xiaomi are doing, but still much more than, for example, Ferrari or a Porsche are doing. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. I wish you all the best in the world and hope to see you again anytime soon. Take care.